All right, folks. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thanks very much for joining us this evening, especially in light of the scheduling issues we had with this meeting. I know a lot of y'all showed a lot of great and very much appreciated flexibility in making sure that we were all able to meet this evening. So we really appreciate that. My name is Taz Lagu. I'm a planner with the town planning department. I'm joined by several other planners from the town, Judy Johnson, Anya Gran-Federmack, and Catherine Shore. We're all town staff. I've been working with the town for various lengths of time. And we're really happy to talk to you about the Housing Choices proposal this evening. We're using Zoom's webinar function just because it's proven to be the most efficient way to use the Zoom calls. We realize that y'all aren't able to see each other, but once we're through the staff presentation, you'll each have an opportunity to share questions, comments, whatever you'd like to share with the group. There's a raise hand function that you'll see on your screen, and we'll use that so folks can come into the call and share their questions or concerns. So, really the point of this call is to make sure that we're hearing from y'all, understanding your questions, concerns about the proposal, and ways that we can make the proposal better. It's still very much a work in progress, so nothing that we're about to share is set in stone. Our goal is to learn from y'all. And so we're going to kick things off with just a quick presentation so that we're all kind of on the same page about what's being proposed. And then we're going to turn things over to y'all for questions. So with that, I will hand things over to Anya, who's going to run us through a presentation on the proposal.
Great. Thanks, Taz. Let me just get this set up really quickly. Okay, do you see the full screen now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you guys. So good evening, everybody. This is an outline of where we've been and where we're going. So I just want to point out that we are here. We are continuing to host community open houses and neighborhood meetings like this one. We have another community open house scheduled for next Monday from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the Seymour Center over on Homestead Road. And one of the things I do want to point out is that, I guess about a month ago on February 22nd, we asked that the council close the public hearing because we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to engage with everybody and hear from you all. And so what you're seeing here is really, like Taz said, a proposal. And so looking forward to the spring, we're going to be continuing to probably host some more open houses and neighborhood meetings. And we're hoping to return to the council on April 10th for a work session. And that will allow us to share with them what we've heard and provide some options for how we could move forward based on the feedback that we've received. So again, here's just our schedule, and I will put a link to the project webpage in the chat here in a few minutes. And we have a updated schedule that we keep fixing on the project webpage, and that gives you all the future dates of meetings and so forth that are coming up. So why are we doing this? Well, back in September of 2021, several of the council members petitioned staff to create a pathway for missing middle housing types. And so based on this, and then there was a study done for the projected housing needs study that's shown that our housing supply is growing, but it's not meeting our current demands. We've been very good at building single family apartments or single family houses, and we've been really good at building apartments, but we're not meeting or not providing much in between. And so there's a segment of our population that we're leaving out of the housing. And so what the study found was that we need approximately 500 new units per year on average just to meet the required demands. So then following that, as part of the Shaping Our Future project, SP Friedman created a report for us, and it found that only a small fraction of people in Chapel Hill both live and work in the community. It also, showed us that our housing values far exceed our average household incomes. And from this, the complete community strategy that I'm sure many of you have heard about was kind of built into it. And it's also calling for a diversity of housing types, both for renters and for owners. And one thing that we cannot stress enough is that through planning and zoning alone, we do not have the ability to control occupancy. So these missing middle housing types may be for renters, They may be owner occupied. It could be a variety. The complete community strategy also found that both new units and accessory apartments can help add to gentle density. So there's really two buckets that our text amendments fall into. The first one is updates to the LUMO. And so these are some cleanup text amendments. We also want to introduce some development standards around townhouses because this is a use that's currently not well defined in the LUMO. And then we wanted to update some of the standards for duplexes and accessory apartments. This part 2 is really the piece that you're more interested in. And so we want to provide opportunities to create missing middle housing types like triplexes, fourplexes, and cottage courts by allowing these in most residential or R zoning districts. We're also proposing to remove the density limitations as they are currently defined. And then one of the things that the future land use map and other documents have promoted is this idea that triplexes and fourplexes could be approved similar to single family development where they're actually approved through or by staff instead of going through a lengthy 12 to 18 month process like they currently do that requires council approval. So when we're talking about missing middle housing from a planning and zoning standpoint, we are really talking about a housing form and a use. We are not talking about income levels. That is outside of our control. And so for us, missing middle housing are really these smaller multifamily units that might be duplexes, fourplexes. They call it a bungalow court. We're calling it a cottage court and so forth. And when we talk about gentle densification, we're really talking about the process of slowly increasing density by allowing the construction of smaller scale apartment buildings, such as the 2 to 4 family homes. So again, these are the purposes of our text amendment. We want to clean up the LUMO. We want to diversify housing types by incorporating some missing middle housing types. We want to increase housing production. We also want to look at and encourage compatible infill development, and I'll talk about what this means a little later on. And then we want to encourage gentle density by strategically and sensitively thinking about where that density can be built. So currently the LUMO defines density as the number of units per acre. And what we think is more important is to focus instead on the lot size, the setbacks, and the building dimensions. These two can also help control density, but you can see how you can take an existing building block and divide it into multiple units without actually changing the mass and scale of the building. On this table, you'll see across the top here that we've got the different zoning districts, and along the left column, we have the different uses. And so where the use is underlined, that would be a new definition to be added into the LUMO. Across, reading this horizontally from left to right, if there is a P, that means that it's currently a permitted use. And if the P is underlined, it's proposed to be a permitted use. So I think we're all pretty familiar with townhouses. We're providing some dimensional standards as well as some building dimensions. We're trying to base a lot of this on what's already required for multifamily. So you'll see an impervious surface ratio of 0.7. And so if you don't know, impervious surface is those areas where the rain can't infiltrate. So like your sidewalks, your roofs, your buildings, driveways, things like that. We're also proposing about 1 to 2 parking spaces per townhouse, depending on what the zoning district is. And so we've been talking to Durham and other communities about some of the things that they've done to encourage missing middle housing. And one of the things that we heard from Durham was that they had a lot of success with this small house on a small lot option. And this would really just be an opportunity for folks to, carve out some extra land within an existing lot and build a house that's proportionally smaller because of that smaller lot size. And so we're proposing for this a minimum lot size of 2,700 square feet. The setbacks get reduced because it is a smaller lot. And then we're also looking for maximum house size of about 1,600 square feet with a maximum footprint of 1,000. So the lot gets smaller and so does the house in this option. The other option that we're adding is the triplexes and fourplexes. And again, we want to try to make sure that these fit into the existing neighborhoods. And so a lot of the dimensional standards that you see, like the minimum lot size, the lot width, street setbacks, and so forth, are really just following the underlying zoning. So they're meeting the same requirements that a single family house would have to meet. We also wanted to make sure that the impervious surface met the same requirements as single family. And so currently for multifamily, the impervious surface limit is 0.7. We're proposing 0.5 so that you have more open space and landscaped areas. Currently, single family houses do not have a tree canopy coverage, but we're providing or proposing a 20% tree canopy coverage on these lots to ensure that there is some trees either maintained or added. And then the LUMO bases the parking for multifamily on the number of bedrooms. And so this would be the same. The number of bedrooms per unit would dictate the number of parking spaces required. And the unit size within these would be between 500 square feet and 1,600 square feet, with the idea that the new triplex or fourplex does have to meet the floor area ratio of the underlying zoning. So we had our urban designer help us think about what this could possibly look like. And so in this first image, you can see that there's an existing single family house. It's got a driveway that goes to a 2-car garage with an accessory apartment above. Number 3 here is a duplex, 5 is a fourplex, and 6 is a triplex. And in all these cases, these buildings would meet our neighborhood compatibility standards, and that we're requiring that the parking be put either to the side or behind the house. And in this case, they're all to the back of the building and have their own garages. And so we want to make sure that any new multifamily development that's coming into existing neighborhoods that are at least 20 years old and have at least 50% of the lots around them have single family houses, that these are sensitively designed so that they fit in and look similar to a single family home. And so for that reason, we're looking at adding some design standards, addressing setbacks, building height, roof forms, building orientation, even the windows and doors and building materials, so that it's congruent with the existing neighborhood. And then the last type of housing here is a cottage court, and this would just be several cottages surrounding interior courtyard that's landscaped. The overall lot size for one of these would be 10,000 to 24,000 square feet. And the number of dwelling units or cottages would be between 3 and 12. Again, the setbacks for the lot would follow the underlying zoning. We want an impervious surface of 0.5, again, trying to match that of single family. And then in this case, we did match the tree canopy coverage at 30%, which is the same as the requirements for multifamily today. And you can see from these building dimensions, we're purposely requiring that these are cottages, that they're much smaller in scale than a typical single family home, so that it's, cottages around a open courtyard and not just more suburban development. So again, here's where we are. We are currently hosting community meetings and open houses, and then starting April 10th, we'll be going to council for a work session and getting some direction from them on how to move forward based on the feedback we've heard from all the neighborhoods. So with that, let me stop sharing, and thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Anya. So now's the Q&A period of the call. We would love to hear from any of y'all that have questions about anything that Anya presented, questions about the proposal more generally, or just comments, right? What are your thoughts about what's being proposed? What would you like to see done differently, done better? Anything's on the table, and we're happy to try to answer as best we can. I know folks from the Stratford Glen neighborhood have shared some questions in writing. We're happy to address those, but we want to make sure that folks that are on the call are able to share their questions first. So I think we'll get through any questions that you all have, and then if we want to go to those written questions after that, we can definitely get to it. So I see several folks already have their hands up. We'll use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen. If you want to ask a question, go ahead and use that, and we'll try to bring folks in kind of 2 at a time, so when you're up for bat.
So I'm going to bring in Jessica and then Adam. Oh, Taz, you have to make me a panel or a host.
All right, I think you should be good now, Anya.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to address the first question that we submitted, and that is regarding restricted covenants. We do have restricted covenants. They are filed when they were filed when the subdivision was created, and because we are in Durham County, they are filed with Durham County. What is the status of the restrictive covenants as far as, is this neighborhood going to be targeted?
Yeah, so the restrictive covenants basically supersede anything that's in the town's zoning ordinance. Restrictive covenants obviously are private agreements that you as neighbors have entered into with each other. And it's nothing that the town is responsible for enforcing. Basically the interaction between zoning and the restrictive covenants is that the zoning might allow you to do something, but if your restrictive covenants prohibit it, then your neighbors could sue you if you build something that that violates the covenants. So
And what about the town? Can
so the
town
town
override it?
No, the town cannot override it because ultimately a restrictive covenant is, I think the best way to think of it is it's a contract between you and all of your neighbors. And so that's not something that the town can override, and it's also not something that the town enforces.
So then Stratford Glen with restrictive covenants will not be rezoned, if I understand you correctly.
That's essentially right. So it will technically be rezoned, but that rezoning, if there's anything in that, and it won't be rezoned, the nature of the zoning will be different. So those changes will happen. But if there's anything in your restrictive covenants, let's say, for example, if your restrictive covenants say that only single family detached homes can be built in
Per lot.
Stratford Glen. Yeah, one per lot. If that's
Correct.
what's in your restrictive covenant, then even if the zoning rules change, your restrictive covenants will still be in effect and will still control what can or can't be built
And
in your
lastly,
neighborhood.
thank you, Taz. And then should we send the restrictive covenants to you in the planning department? You need to have that on file because, as I said, we're in that funny zone of Chapel Hill, Durham County.
It's already on file.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that, Jessica, but you wouldn't need to send it to us.
We would not. I want to just make sure I got
That's
it.
right. You would not. Yeah, but thank you
Okay,
for checking.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Taz, for this opportunity and for accepting our questions and answering my question.
Yes, ma'am. And thank you for helping organize this meeting. I know you were instrumental in getting it all scheduled. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you too.
And I would just add that if you're looking for copies of restrictive covenants, whether it's for your neighborhood or another, you can always go to the county that you're in, the Register of Deeds office, and they'll you
Yes.
should be able to find it online. So
Yes.
Jessica, I'm going to move you out and I'm going to move Mookie
Yes.
in.
Mhm.
And Adam, you are up.
Yes. Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you guys for holding this meeting. And look, my understanding is that you guys are wanting this to be more of an open process. Is that right? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. So I appreciate that. One of the things that I've noticed is that you've chosen to use a presentation style on Zoom. And earlier you said that was more efficient. Could you just speak more to that, the efficiency of it?
I think I was talking about the webinar format.
Oh, okay.
You know, when we have, yeah, and it's just when we have, you know, for example, I think there are about 25 or so folks on the call right now, and so using the typical meeting format where we'd all be kind of tiny thumbnails on the screen just gets a little unwieldy, which is why we've tried to use the webinar format.
Can I share with you just that I'm on meetings around the world basically, and like there's one meeting where there are 900 people on the call and all little postage stamps, and you can still, you know, mute people, you can keep people, because, you know, I can understand that one concern might be that, you know, someone might get angry if you have people in postage stamp form, you might have people yelling at you, that kind of thing. I think I can speak for Stratford Land. I think that it'd be helpful, and maybe for others, to be able to actually see each other so that we really are a community that can share with each other. But you still would have the right to kind of like still say, okay, I'm going to unmute you. That is possible. And that's certainly in that 900 person meeting, this person is unmuted. And this way we can really see who are we as a community. So that is my request going forward. As someone, you know, I'm a professional facilitator myself. So that's, you know, in terms of the process, that's would be my request.
Yeah,
Thank
no, I really appreciate that feedback, Adam. And we're, like I said, we're continuously looking for ways to make this better. And part of that is how we're reaching out to folks. So we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I would just add too that I know not everybody can make these meetings. And so for that reason, we do have a recording. So if anybody needs the recording to share, just let us know. The town has a YouTube channel that we can give you a link to the recording. And we're also happy to share the presentation that we gave, whatever helps you all out. Okay, so Adam, I'm going to move you out and I'm going to move Joanna in. But Miyuki, you're next.
Yes, thank you. You just answered what I was going to ask for, and that is the physical presentation or the visual one for those of us who need a little bit more time to absorb that material, which looked really interesting, really good, but you went through it very quickly for obvious reasons, and I would love to have time to look at it. I'm on Clark Lake, and I think a group of people couldn't be on this webinar and would like to look at it as well. So if you would send a link or to somebody, that'd be
Yes.
great.
We can do that. I believe when you all registered to attend today that we got your email addresses. So I will blind copy you all on an email as soon as we have that link
Thank you.
available and share it hopefully by the end of the week.
Yeah, and I'm now that you've got me, let me also ask, since there is certainly development that is proposed for, I don't know if you want to answer a specific development question, but it pertains to the larger issues around moving to some of the proposed changes that you discussed. What is the town, oh, I'm sorry, you can't see me or the cat that is about to take over my screen. What are the proposed changes that the town is thinking about doing with all of the increased density that you are projecting in order to accommodate all of the people who think this area is so fantastic that they want to move in, and therefore you are trying to figure out how to accommodate all of the many people who you want to, you know, increase the housing for. And obviously there's infrastructure, not just actual housing. And I don't know if you're prepared to answer that or not, but that's certainly a concern that's been raised amongst the people that I've talked with.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Muki. And it's certainly a question that we've heard a lot. And it's at top of mind, right? We don't want to grow Chapel Hill to the point that it can't properly serve its residents. And so we have discussed infrastructure with you know, some of our major infrastructure providers or service providers like OWASA. And what they've really said is that they don't have any concerns about the capacity from a system-wide level, right? We're not concerned that the town's going to run out of water, or that our sewer capacity kind of at a high level is going to be impacted by what we see is really relatively small growth that could be associated with this particular missing middle housing proposal. Now that's system-wide, right? That doesn't mean that there might be a street, for example, where the sewer lines are old, or, you know, the water lines aren't providing enough water to that street. And that's why all of our major service providers are part of the development review process, right? OWASA is, for example, one of the most important agencies outside of the town that's involved in permitting whether a new building can be built. And so if there are concerns that, you know, on a particular street the infrastructure isn't sufficient to support what's being proposed, it wouldn't be allowed to be built unless the developer or the homeowner, whoever's building it, was willing to make the investments to make sure that the infrastructure is up to the challenge of dealing with the new development. And just more broadly, you know, I think that we have, you know, looked at other communities. We've seen the kind of development patterns that other communities that have done missing middle housing have seen. And if we see similar patterns in Chapel Hill, this missing middle housing proposal isn't going to result in a ton of growth. It's going to be a handful of new units every year, and so that really, I think, is a big part of what we're looking at when it comes to what the infrastructure impacts are going to be. That they're not expected to be significant. Really, whatever type of infrastructure you look at, it's not anticipated to strain any of those systems at all.
All right, Wookie, I'm going to move you out. I'm going to move Ed Harrison in. Joanna, you're up. I would ask that if you already had a chance to speak, if you can just put your hand down for now, it helps me keep track of who hasn't spoken yet.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Did y'all hear how excited Jessica was when she found out her neighborhood was safe? She was all happy with everything because her neighborhood is safe and will not be, you know, quote unquote targeted. I live right next to or down the street rather in Clark Lake, and we don't have a restrictive covenant and HOA. We're not in a conservation district, so we are not safe. How would we go about can we put in place make our neighborhood a conservation district? Are those neighborhoods still safe? I know there's some talk about nullifying that. And how soon would we need to put an HOA in place in order to protect ourselves against this update? I mean, can it be done whenever, just before a developer buys the property? What are some do you have concerns about developers coming in and outbidding regular families that want to purchase a home on a normal size lot for their children, but a developer will outbid so he can come in and build cottage courts? Is there any controls put in place? For the impervious surface that you mentioned, would you be matching the impervious surface that is already on the lot, or an impervious surface of the guidance regulations that you already have? Like we have a home here that's almost up for sale, and it's a smaller home, but on a bigger lot. So if you put in those cottage courts, that's going to be, you know, quadrupling the impervious surface on that lot, which would affect our, you know, flood prone area here. You also talk about missing middle homes. You have so many developments going up, and you do not hold the developer's feet to the fire to build these missing middle houses. You could, up here on Hope Road and Old Chapel Hill, there are 4 separate developments that are targeted to go in. And you guys let the developers get away with, and not you, the town in general, you're not holding their feet to the fire to build these homes that you want. Why aren't you exhausting the land that you have now before you start looking within people's neighborhoods? I know I'm just trying to get it all out because I know there's a lot of people here. You know, the idea that you can't control the type of housing that goes in is so terrifying. We have no idea what we will get. You have no idea if it'll meet the need that you really need. You constantly talk about affordable housing. Affordable housing is not being built. These are just other avenues that these developers are going to come in and develop Chapel Hill because they want to. There's so much money to be made here for rich students or people putting up rental units. It's just, there's no control happening. And that's what's so terrifying. I'm a lifelong resident here, born and raised. I love my neighborhood, the trees that I have, where my, you know, kids ride their bikes, and it just feels like I have no control over where I live. And lastly, did you write all those down? Are you going to be able to respond? Lastly, what has the response been like from all the other neighborhoods? I know you've had lots of meetings. We've seen that letter from the attorney, Bill Bryan, that sent to the town from that neighborhood that's close to campus. That's been going around. So, you know, which is a very negative letter. What is the response has been like from other neighborhoods? Are they also very concerned, especially the ones that aren't protected by an HOA or conservation district?
I can respond to some of your questions, and I'll ask my colleagues to tap in as, you know, some of my knowledge doesn't cover all of the questions that you posed, but one of the questions you presented, which I really appreciate you laying out the range of concerns that you have, was why are we not, if I'm understanding correctly, why haven't we seen this type of housing come in other places? Why are we not seeing fourplexes in other parts of town? And one of the main goals of us putting forward this text amendment is we do not have a explicit definition for fourplex yet in the town code. And so this would be a new use in the land use management ordinance. So we are hopeful that when we create that opportunity for more dense housing types, that can be placed in appropriate areas. We're not able to do that with a text amendment. But with the capacity constraints that we talked about, with the neighborhood compatibility elements that we mentioned, we're hopeful that by introducing the options, the diversity of options for fourplex, for a triplex, triplex currently is, I think, only permitted in one zoning district. So this would be, we're thinking of it as like opening up the opportunity rather than thinking of it as a consequence for neighborhoods. To another question you had about the neighborhood conservation district, that is a process that happens. The previous ones that were developed happened over many years of community engagement. The most recent one that was established was in 2016. And so we don't anticipate that a new one would be created without following similar procedures. There's specific procedures kind of laid out. And admittedly, we have not seen much appetite from council for creating new NCDs. So with that in mind, we are hopeful that the areas that are available for what we're considering infill development paired with more what you'd say maybe larger scale development, they combine to meet the growing need for housing. So it's not just one or the other, it's a combined strategy. And I want to ask if Taz or Anya have anything to add. I know I didn't cover all of your questions, I'm sorry. But I want to
No,
make
but
sure
I am concerned
we cover
about,
them.
yeah, control the developer, like a developer coming in and buying a lot from out, you know, from a family.
Mhm. I don't have a specific answer to that, but if my colleagues do, I'd welcome their input.
Yeah, Joanna, to be honest, right, there isn't something or anything that the town can do to decide who buys property, who develops that property. We have not seen in communities that have passed similar missing middle housing reforms, we haven't seen you know, this kind of wave of institutional developers or investors coming in and buying up properties. I think there's a lot of structural issues that are related to that, like the type of capital that's available to folks for trying to rebuild or build new missing middle. It's not the sort of thing that institutional kind of large scale investors are really involved in. And so again, we don't have we don't have tools or the authority to stop it, but it's also just not something that we've seen in other communities that have done similar
But
reform.
how are you really able to track that? I mean, how do you know who was another bidder on a piece of property? I mean, is that really, do you really have solid numbers on that? I mean, is that really something that you can say assuredly isn't happening?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely can't say. I think that the particular question of are investors outbidding, outcompeting families, I agree that that's not something that we can answer.
And
What
that
I'm
would be
saying is,
devastating,
yeah,
right? I mean,
what
we
I'm
definitely don't want that.
yeah, what I'm saying is that we and other communities just haven't seen a wave of investors, of large investors or developers. They haven't been observed to be major players, right, in any of the construction that's happening around these missing middle housing types. So can't specifically answer the question of are they outcompeting families. I'm just saying that we haven't seen them be kind of major factors,
Well, so
generally
then
speaking.
who's developing? You're saying, so not large developers, so then midline developers? Is that who's doing it?
Yeah, I mean, it tends to be either the homeowners themselves who are interested in um, making more kind of economic use out of their property, or it ends up being the same people that around town that you would see building on a smaller scale, whether they're building individual homes or something small like that. These are folks that maybe have relationships with local banks, other types of capital other than what the major institutional investors are working with.
Right, more so than your standard homeowner and your new buyers. So what has the response been from all the other neighborhoods?
Yeah. I think it's been very similar to what you're already hearing on this call. We have, I mean, I won't beat around the bush. We have not heard nobody's rolled out the red carpet for this proposal on the calls that we have been on, right? We've heard a lot of, I think, very genuine concerns about what this proposal could do for people's neighborhoods. Folks do not like the notion that the home next door is going to change, and we understand that, and we want to be responsive and sensitive to those concerns.
Okay, I would just like to say, I appreciate y'all doing this and taking all the negative feedback. And I know it's not fun, but appreciate you listening to us, and you just pass my negativity on to the council, but I appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you. So Joanna, I'm going to move you out, and I'm going to move Anne in. And Ed, you are up.
So am I on right now? Is that what you're saying? Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, I think the staff know this is not my first rodeo. I was 16 years on the council and 16 years on the Regional Transportation Committee, living in my house in Newton Drive, which is heading down Pope Road on the right before you hit the roundabout. It's a dead-end street, 15 houses, not an HOA. Probably can't afford a lawyer, so we're sort of on our own here. And mostly I want to talk about Pope Road because the staff have probably not been in a position to learn much about it. I think you know that the jurisdiction line, the jurisdiction line is the west side of the right-of-way of Pope Road. When you pull out of a street onto Pope Road from Chapel Hill, the pavement changes color and you're entering unannexed Pope Road. Durham has never annexed it, won't annex it, which gives it a unique position in terms of transportation improvements, is that unless a developer does them or the town pays for them somehow, which has never happened, it stays the way it is, which is 22 foot wide in most places, not straight, and a pretty scary place on a bike. I've been on a bike a few thousand times in a third of a century. And that we've laid out the picture there. that's the concern, is that we're stuck with the infrastructure we have pretty much in terms of transportation, unless there is a development, and there are not many places on the Chapel Hill side of Pope Road left for a developer to do anything. The Ernie Brown's project is the first one in a while. Odd that more of it is south of Pope Road than north of Pope Road, notwithstanding the land use plan, as I understand it. But I think one important question I have here is for back to the neighborhood. We're in a 15 home neighborhood, 3/4 owner occupied, as far as I can tell. It seems like it's up to us in the court system to enforce what is helping us here, which is the restricted covenants we have. They are written, and I got them from the Register of Deeds in Durham, ran them by the Register of Deeds in Orange County, because I've known him a while. And he says they're pretty standard. They are automatically renewed unless the body of owners votes against them. So they appear to be in force. What isn't clear to me is how do they actually get enforced, and whether you can address that for us. I don't think our particular street is as targeted as some are, because the lot sizes are small, but you never can tell anymore. Are you able to address that?
I mean, is the general question just how
We
restrictive
rely on the
covenants are
court system
enforced?
to do it.
Yeah, I mean, again, the town has never been in the practice of enforcing restrictive covenants.
And you,
We wouldn't have standing to enforce restrictive
Yeah.
covenants, right? Because we're not a party to what's essentially a contract between you and your neighbors. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is because restrictive covenants are created by the community. It's ultimately up to the community to enforce them.
these were created by the original builder.
Yeah.
Who then built a house that didn't comply with them, is actually too small, which is better than too big. And I don't think most people will send. I can send them around to sort of the owner occupied, but not sure what the point is at this time. But anyway, I think you're doing a good job with a complicated topic, as I've said before, getting this out. But I think we have more thinking to do about the status of Pope Road and here, and how it's affected by what happens along it. And I think that's all right now, but I'm enjoying hearing what people say, which is why I was on the council for a while. Enjoyed hearing what people had to say about the town.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Ed, I'm going to move you out. Ann Rogers, can you hear us? And I'm going to move in Ann Hartley.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
This is actually Susan Rice. Ann shared her link with me because I didn't know anything about this meeting, which I appreciated that. Thanks, Ann. First of all, I'm going to address quite a few issues. I do believe that the developers own Chapel Hill right now. Everything that they have wanted, it's been pretty much clear cut. And I think to the point where a lot of the developers are, they're getting a shoe in. And I'll give you an example. I think the Hughes Street property has already been bought by the developer. I think that I checked Durham GIS, and from what I gather, property has changed hands to his. Now, I see that as a wink, wink, oh, a red light or a green light that he is going to develop that property. So I have real serious issues with that part. I do want to challenge all the figures and all the concepts of town council and Chapel Hill, in that everybody says everybody wants to move here. We need to build, build, build. We need to have housing for all these people. And part of that is over 77,000 unit apartments have already been built within the last 3 years. So, or promised to be built in the works. So, and these are confirmed. These aren't, it's not potential, it is 7,000 apartment units. So a tremendous amount of people are moving in. Now, the problem with that is that Chapel Hill is a transient community. It's always been, always will be, because the biggest employer and the biggest amount of people that come in for the university. So students are considered residents because they live here 6 months plus, whether it's a day or 2 days, but they are here for 9 months, but then they leave for a portion of the year. So even though we are counting them as residents, they are not technically going to be living here. So they are in dorms, they are in campus housing, and the campus is building lots of that. But that doesn't mean that as a resident, they're going to stay. So I think a lot of the concept of having people saying 10,000 people are moving in a year, I think that's a fallacy. I think that is not correct. So moving on, I think there's a reason that single family zoning has been historic. And now you're going to destroy that. You're looking to destroy that with this possible missing middle housing. But there is, I can't say personally, I wouldn't want to live in something like that, any of it. I don't want to share walls with somebody. I want my single family home. And I worked very hard to get it. And I think a lot of the potential of the people that really want to come and live here, not just go to school, want a single family home. And that's being destroyed. So again, I don't think this middle housing, I'm not sure that the public is going to jump on it like everybody thinks. So I think that's a concern. The other concerns, we're just not being listened to. We've been saying the same thing over and over and over again. And I've been to meeting after meeting after meeting, and we're saying the same thing. And we are being ignored. We are being not heard and not acknowledged. And if it was a one meeting, that'd be fine, understand. But I've been to the last year, I've been to several meetings, and we're saying the same thing. So the other thing is that these multiple family units into existing single family homes, and they're going to fit in? No, they won't. We all know that. They will stick out like a sore thumb. You're talking about these cottage courts. You have one fire, the whole complex is gone, potentially. How do you address that? So, it's a serious issue, but it's not being addressed. When you have close homes like this, you do potentially have issues. I'm sorry, hold on just a minute. I did want to ask, who is this urban designer? That, I don't know who this urban designer is, and I would like to know. If you could answer that, that would be great. Sensitivity to design, what you're talking about and fitting into a single family home neighborhood is not going to fit. It's not going to be correct. It just will not work, in my opinion. So just addressing this particular concept and not the rest of the things that are going on. I do appreciate what you're doing, but I think Chapel Hill is changing in a way that it's not going to look like Chapel Hill. I hear that all the time. It's not the Chapel Hill we know. I just think this influx of building homes and building apartments and building, this multiple missing middle housing is just not the way to go. So, but thank you for listening.
Yes,
Thank you,
ma'am.
Anne. Oh, go ahead, Jazz.
No, I was just gonna say thank you. We definitely hear you, Anne, and we appreciate your comments.
And Anne, the town does employ an urban designer. It's Brian Peterson, and he's on staff.
Thank you.
So no problem. I'm gonna move you out. Anne Hartley, you are up next, and I'm going to move in Adam Vane. And so I just ask again, if you've already spoken and we've answered your questions, please feel free to lower your hand. It helps us out.
Okay, good afternoon, and thanks again for allowing this opportunity. First, I'd like to just reinforce the comments that Joanna mentioned from Clark Lake. I'm also from Clark Lake, and so I just want to emphasize that I reiterate her points that she was making and the concerns. And I think a couple of mine also flow into Ann Rogers. First question is, I've always in the business of doing solution strategies. And the first thing you have to do is actually figure out what problem are you really trying to solve. And what you learn is oftentimes when somebody gives you, say, I need X, Y, Z, that's really not the solution. But you should have to start asking questions at that point to really get down to the bottom of what is the real issue here. We are hearing about a solution that is going to completely transform the look and face of Chapel Hill. So the thing that we all think is the big draw to Chapel Hill, why people want to live here, what a wonderful environment is, it's being destroyed. So that makes no sense. So when you take the assumption that we need this middle, whatever we're calling it, ask the question why. And then when that question gets answered, ask another why. And keep asking whys for five levels of whys, and you will finally get to the bottom of what people are really trying to talk about. So I would just suggest that exercise, because what I'm hearing doesn't add up. And I've been doing solution strategies all my life, and that is a really good rule of thumb. So it doesn't make sense. You mentioned what is driving this demand. I haven't heard anything that's talked about what is driving the demand. Is it because Google and Apple and Facebook are coming to town? Is that it? Because Chapel Hill is a university environment. We know what that university population looks like. Has that really changed that much over the years? And so what is going to change about the population mix that is not being stated at this point? And I think if you were able to articulate all the other types of populations that are going to be coming into Chapel Hill that you're trying to serve, that would help me better understand what you're trying to accomplish here. And maybe we who are concerned about all of this can help you come up with better ideas. So I think that would be a suggestion, that if you start to share that with people, instead of coming out with, this is a done deal because of X, Y, and Z, you have a lot of talent that is tuned into what's going on here. And if you could really articulate what is it we're trying to accomplish in the long run, don't just go on the few words that we are hearing. I think we could get a much better outcome, because you have a tremendous amount of people that are interested in this and want great outcomes for everybody. But again, if you could articulate all the other populations that you see coming in, what problem are you truly trying to solve, and how is this going to solve it? Or maybe you need a different solution altogether. You mentioned that you have explored some other communities that have implemented this type of housing. If you could say the names of those communities, are there communities around here that we can drive to and look at? That would be something that we could actually tangibly look at. And the third question, or the last question that I want to reiterate from Joanna is, and I don't think you answered it, can a community implement restrictive covenants and HOAs in a moment of time to actually protect them, or is it too late? So those are the things that I'm interested in.
Thank you for those questions. We love a good root cause analysis, and I know the 5 whys is a good process, so that's definitely something we'll look into. I think as far as the HOA question, my understanding is that it's not impossible, but I certainly wouldn't be able to advise or really speak intelligibly about the process for creating an HOA. Again, I believe it is not impossible, but you would definitely want to talk to an attorney for any sort of legal advice on that front. One quick question, what as far as the drivers of growth in Chapel Hill, the university is not a driver, in terms of the enrollment is not really a significant driver of Chapel Hill's growth. Campus enrollment has been basically flat for the last 10 years, and the university is really only looking to grow by about 1% per year. So we're not forecasting or really anticipating that that's part of the demand for growth in Chapel Hill. But Chapel Hill doesn't exist in a bubble, right? We are part of a rapidly growing region, and we're increasingly interconnected to that region, right? 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have I-40 connecting us to the rest of the triangle. 15501 was a quiet country road. 54 was much different. And so the town is becoming more interconnected to the region as a whole. And so we are experiencing the same pressures that the entire region is facing, because we're a booming economy, right? And we want to be able to evolve the town to keep up with the demands of the region.
But do you see that by the direction we're going in, perhaps the demand that, or the interest in people living in Chapel Hill, there's a balance between when we destroy that and we lose that? And how do you balance that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that question is fundamental to what we're trying to do. We are trying to find an appropriate and context sensitive balance. And so we hear you, and we're asking and trying to answer those same questions as we keep trying to improve this proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Anne. Adam, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I noticed your hand was up before, so I moved you in.
Oh, I appreciate that. Nothing specific except that I appreciate your answer about the restrictive covenant. My understanding is that it can be done. I was talking to some people today, but I don't have, but my sense is that people can make some movement to have one. But I'll leave it to the lawyers to say that for sure.
Thank you. So I know there's a few more hands raised. I'm going to try to go and make sure that we catch people that we haven't before. We also only have about 2 minutes left. So if we don't get to your question tonight, feel free to email us or add it to the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get an answer to you. So Rachel, you haven't spoken before, so let me move you in.
Thank you very much. Rachel Willis, resident of Clark Lake, more than 30 years. And we have, of course, been meeting with town staff about the previously called the Hughes Street development, now Carolina Crossing combined development north and south of Pope Road, as well as other development. And we in particular are extremely concerned about stormwater management. What are the possibilities for overlay districts for all of this type of housing, even though the percentage of impervious surface may seem to be well protected in these middle housing? It's not well protected if the development process is, as we have seen all over town, where they clear everything. Just the process of development puts so much silt and debris into stormwater channels. We have a 6-acre lake on a 10-acre parcel of commonly owned land. I don't know if Clark Lake Estates, our homeowner association, counts as an HOA. And I don't know what membership in it means or doesn't mean for particular neighbors with respect to the being exempt with restrictive covenants on housing sizes. But what I do know is that the town has vested interest in really good stormwater management, not flooding out this side of town with the amount of development. So what are the possibilities for overlay districts? Both of you mentioned, both Taz and Anya, having Taz addressed, if you have particular neighbors with infrastructure concerns. Certainly Owasso has infrastructure concerns. They have a big pumping station across the street on the Durham County side of Pope Road, but it is for the town of Chapel Hill to deal with our stormwater. You talked about particular neighborhoods being protected. How can neighborhoods be protected as we were with residential zoning status for decades? If any given homeowner in a neighborhood is able to pursue this at any time. You're requiring individual homeowners or small homeowner neighborhoods, whether they're homeowner associations or just groups of neighbors that are very concerned about the value of their property and the risk of flooding from excessive development, poor development practices. I mean, I've seen them all over town of clearing everything and dirt in the streets, you know, on a regular basis. How can these neighborhoods be protected? We can't go running off to hire an attorney as some of the more high dollar properties central to town can. What are the possibilities for securing zoning districts on top of the R1, because it is an environmentally sensitive area? I know that, you know, resource conservation districts on particular lots have prevented many of us from building on parcels of the land we own. But what does it do for, as several mentioned, you know, a given property being targeted for a cottage court or something? And I will add one other thing. I know you're out of time. I think it's the beginning of the parking wars. I'm looking at some of the dense development that has occurred throughout town. And I know I was on transportation board for 6 years, the desire to do, quote, traffic calming with narrower streets and some on-street parking. But it also creates incredible strains on particular neighborhoods. And you can go through some very expensive neighborhoods in the town of Chapel Hill and see where people can't park. They've got their landscapers and their maids and their kids with extremely tight parking situations where things have on public streets really been reduced to one lane for vast differences. And I worry a lot about this small lot size and the number of cars. And, you know, are we going to get to Seattle proportions where, you know, people don't have parking, they pay extra for it at their complex? Is that what we're really aimed at? I don't think the number of bedrooms dictates the number of cars as perfectly as the slides went by, although I will take a careful look at them. So those are my questions. I realize it's past 6. If you want to address them in writing, that would be terrific. But is there a possibility for a layover district for environmentally sensitive areas?
Thanks a lot for those questions, Rachel. So you mentioned RCDs. The town already has overlay districts for environmentally sensitive areas. I think that the two questions that you brought up, parking and stormwater, point to a really important distinction or a feature of these proposals, right? And that's that you know, a single family home or even a duplex currently doesn't have any stormwater regulations on it, doesn't have any parking requirements. There's no requirement, for example, that a single family home has enough space on site for all the cars that may want to park there. This proposal, it wants to be sensitive, right, to the neighborhoods. And so a lot of the new missing middle housing types that are included in the proposal would be subject to the town's stormwater regs in a way that single family homes currently aren't. So they wouldn't be able to, you know, get away with certain types of development that would just, you know, dump a bunch of water on a neighboring property. They would need to do some engineering to figure out what those impacts are going to be and how they can mitigate them. And the same with parking, right? Unlike a single family home, a triplex or fourplex would actually be required to have parking on site so that you're not having a bunch of cars spilling out onto the street. We're definitely planning to talk to, you know, our parking enforcement folks and understand how we can make sure that there are kind of wraparound services so that we're not just relying on zoning, but also proactively enforcing these rules. And so we, you know, it's definitely something we're looking into, and that we've tried to include at least a handful of proactive controls on the front end in this proposal. And with that, Anya, unless you wanted to bring in any other folks.
It's after 6. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Feel free to add your questions to the chat. You can send us an email. We're consistently updating our frequently asked questions. And so you might see your question on there, or you might already see it on there. We've been trying to capture all the questions that we receive often. But with that, I think we can probably wrap up the meeting, and I apologize for not going over for the few hands that we do still have raised.
All right.
So thank you all for your time tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.